Last week, I talked about how I had recoiled in fear and dismay due to my sitting in on the meetings of the committee, APA's Committee for the Advancement of the Practice of Psychology, as I saw the oncoming juggernaut of managed care. And I began to understand how much the health insurance companies were going to constrict and have an impact on how we practice and who we saw and under what circumstances we saw them and for how long we saw them and what they were willing to pay for and weren't willing to pay for. And it felt like an exceptionally suffocating and very unpleasant landscape. I had also discovered that about 84% of the checks I was currently putting into my business account back then were being written by insurance companies. I was very vulnerable to the changes that were about to take place. And I decided I needed to figure out how to exit the healthcare marketplace as expeditiously as I could. I put together a set of business principles I was going to follow, and I discovered I had the materials to start teaching my colleagues how to end or at least greatly diminish their dependency on insurance reimbursement for funding their careers. And with the help of the American Psychological Association's of independent practice, I started going around the country offering continuing education courses on how to reconfigure one's practice so that this exit from the healthcare delivery system might become possible. At during the last session I held with my audience here, I began to present the contents of the business plan, and I will pick up where I left. And I have learned subsequently how to do screen sharing, so I can actually bring up on the screen now the written version of the handout that I gave to the groups of people that I was meeting with across the country. Here it should come. There's the business plan. And this is about how far I'd gotten. We were just working our way through all the various expenses that I learned and had to pay attention to are part of the small business we run. In most people's practices, most of these will come up and have to be paid for. I had just gotten through entertainment last time, so I'm going to go on. The next one is gifts. There are certain kinds of gifts that you can make during the year that will be tax deductible to you. That's why the asterisk is there. There are two kinds of gifts. There's no reason why uh, I do this frequently. You cannot send some nice holiday gift to somebody who's been a good referral source for the year. It's very nice to acknowledge referrals, so you might send a basket of fruit or who knows God what else. This is really business promotion on your part, and the IRS clearly allows you to deduct that from your as a business expense. And you see the asterisk is there. They will let you have a more liberal number and that final total for the year if you're a corporation than if you're just an individual making gifts. There is a second category of gifts that is more controversial. Depending on how we were trained, some of us have been told no, under no circumstances should you ever give a gift to a client. But I'm not of that persuasion. There have been times that I've given gifts to clients. I consider that a legitimate business expense too. The first time I did it was a client who had gone through something that I had gone through myself. They were having terrible fertility problems, and the quality of their relationship with each other had deteriorated under the stress of all the procedures they had to endure, and the having sex on a scheduled time, and being disappointed over and over again, and grieving every time the wife menstruated. So I work with them and help them to be kind to each other and to help them to find the resiliency to keep going through the trouble. And after 2 years, she finally got pregnant. And after 2 years and 9 months, she finally gave birth to a child. And I was very happy to send them a gift on the, on the when I got the birth announcement from them that they had been successful. They were entitled to gifts from the whole world, and I wanted to be one of the persons giving them a gift. So For important symbolic times in the work I've done with somebody, if they've mastered something they had been previously very hard for them, I like sending them a gift, and I'll continue to do that. Uh, Health and dental care. Look at the next two: health and dental care, and health and dental insurance. Well, I am getting quite elderly, and these expenses are get very large as you get older and older. You consume more health care and more out-of-pocket health care, even if you have insurance. And certain insurance, like getting long-term care insurance, becomes more expensive than when you were younger. Uh, if you pay for it out of a corporation, you can do something wonderful. You can, since myself and my wife are the only employees of my corporation, we have a wonderful benefits package. Our boss gives us wonderful benefits. One of the wonderful benefits is 100% of all health expenses are paid for by the corporation. So what are we doing? We're using pre-tax dollars to pay for all our healthcare costs rather than giving us paychecks to ourselves and then paying after we've gotten the paycheck. And taxes have already been deducted for healthcare money. And in our case, that's the largest deduction our corporation has every year, is what it's costing us to keep our health in place. Interest charges. If you borrow some money during the year and pay interest on the money loan you've taken out, the interest you pay is tax deductible. Life insurance. Here's another good one that a corporation can do that an individual cannot do. Corporations can provide what's called keep in life insurance so that the corporation continues and gets the money when the insured dies. And the corporation can carry about $100,000 of life insurance on the life of a key person, and that gets deducted as a business expense. You don't have to pay for all of your life insurance with, again, dollars that taxes have already been deducted from. You're paying with pre-tax dollars for that. Licenses and permits, every business has to pay local taxes, some kind of licenses and permits for being a business. Maintenance and repairs, computers break down, printers break down, furniture needs to be cleaned. All kinds of maintenance and repairs go on periodically in your practice. Those are deductions you can take, of course. I have a miscellaneous category for things I hadn't think of. We all buy office supply of one sort or another. Parking validation is a good one to comment on. Uh, Most people practice in an office building, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of various kinds of office buildings later. But most times there's parking there for clients. Some of us have been lucky to have buildings where there's just parking behind the building for anybody who comes to the building. There's no charges for using it. But most larger buildings have a fee that people have to pay for parking in the lot of a building. And I'm suggesting if you want to send a gracious message to your clients, validate their parking. So coming to see you doesn't cost them anything. That's a lost art. Hardly anybody validates parking anymore. And I suggest you do it as a goodwill gesture to your clients. You can usually, if you're a tenant in the building, you usually buy parking validation stickers to be put on the whatever the receipt is. The usual cost is about $3 a visit to you to validate somebody's parking. And that's such a precious thing you're doing for them. You're taking care of them, again, in a different way. And it sends a caring message. So please consider doing that. When you set fees, you can always set your fees a little bit larger if you're in a building where you have to validate the parking and still get money, but do the parking validation, and you'll be giving much nicer messages if you do that. Postage, you'll have postage for various pieces of professional business. That's tax deductible. Printing and duplicating, every once in a while, you may have some extra printing you need to do. You may send out announcements. You may make brochures. Who knows what you're going to do by way of printing and duplicating, but occasionally you'll have such an expense. refunds to clients. Sometimes we get overpaid. I still don't bill any insurance companies for anything. I give super bills, and the client is supposed to take care of billing the insurance company. But once in a while, the insurance company will make a mistake and they'll send the money to me rather than the client. So I simply deposit it in my account and I write a check, a refund check to the client to cover for that. So you will find yourself occasionally refunding some money. Rent, most of us don't own the buildings we're in. We pay rent to a landlord. That's certainly deductible. You will have subscriptions to journals and books you buy. That's another deductible expense. You'll pay business taxes. You'll pay property taxes in some venues. You'll have telephone expenses. Some of us still carry pagers. I don't want to be instantly available to anybody. I've never carried a pager and I never will carry a pager. But you'll have telephone expenses for your cell phones. If you have a landline in your office, you'll pay for that too. You will travel occasionally and go to meetings. The federal guidelines are very clear about this. If you travel to a distant city to attend a conference, present a paper, attend a professional meeting, 100% of the travel expenses are deductible. And if you're engaged in the activity at least 4 hours a day, you can deduct the cost of meals and whatever else are your expenses while you're gone. In most places where you rent space, you're paying for some utilities also. So there's another expense. And then I left 2 rooms for others about things I may not have thought of ever. I haven't come up with any yet, but they're there in case there are extra expenses that I hadn't considered. So when I give this out, ask the recipients of my workshop to get their last year's tax return and to enter all the figures, and finally here to add up the total of their professional expenses for the previous year, adding up all those categories. Up above, they've already, oh, go up above and look at what's on the form. Oops. There it is. There the income category. So here up was the total gross professional income. And then we finally come to the total annual professional expenses. And now you subtract one from another. Hopefully, you've not gone in the hole. Hopefully, you're not lending money to your own business in order to survive, that there's a plus up there when you subtract the expenses from the income. And now we'll come to ordinary business school language, the bottom line. One, if the difference between your annual income and annual expenses does not permit you to draw a reasonable salary and or to make a sufficient contribution to an IRA, a KEO, or a corporate pension plan, then immediate action is required. If you're falling behind slowly or getting cramped slowly so you can't save any money at all, you're spending every dollar quick. Start doing some different things. So we come to step 3 now, an efficiency analysis. I want practices not only to survive, but I want them to be run as most cost effectively possible with as little waste as possible. So please consider what percentage your current expenses are of your current annual income. Enter the proper numbers in the formula below. Enter the expenses, divide by the income, and then you'll get the percentage. What percent are your expenses of your income? The bottom line, if your practice is one that's incorporated, this percent should not exceed 40%. If it does, immediate action is required. If you're a corporation, you should have discretionary money that's 60% of what you've taken in left over after all your expenses have been paid. You're running a very efficient practice if you're at 60%. The reason that that's different than the next, number 2, if your practice is not one that's incorporated, this percentage should not exceed 33.33%. If it does, immediate action is required. Why are those figures different? Because you're paying as an individual lots of things with post-tax dollars. And so It's not very efficient to do that, and therefore you should keep that on even more if you're not incorporated. Uh, all right, so what are you going to do? If you do this drill and you find out you're not meeting my benchmarks, what can you do to make your practice more efficient and less costly? If you've come through the stage one analysis without needing to take any immediate action, do not feel too secure. Your present circumstances are just buying you some time, and the kinds of suggestions for expense reduction that follow below are certainly worth your considering for the difficult future that's going to lie ahead for all of us. There is simply less urgency for you to commit yourself to having to embrace any of these for now. On the other hand, if the indicators suggest that you need to take immediate action, you can do so most quickly and effectively through cutting costs at once while you start to plan and to implement the longer term income enhancement strategies that you will begin to put into place as described later. So I'm going to start by saying how to cut expenses, and then I'm going to go on to make suggestions about how to expand income. Both of them are necessary to try and make practices as effective as possible. All right. I am not there watching over the shoulders of takers of this workshop. So I ask them to try and hold themselves responsible. This is the ritual by which they can hold themselves responsible. They will publicly to themselves commit themselves to reducing my expenses through attacking the following wasteful expenses. Check all that would be helpful. One, I will talk to my accountant about whether or not I can save dollars by incorporating my practice. Two, I will talk to my accountant about the desirability of setting up a pension and profit sharing plan. You can always avoid paying taxes and save money by putting it away in something the government does not tax. That's a cost effective thing for you to do, but of course, you have to have enough discretionary money to park that. By the way, this is another advantage of being incorporated. If you're incorporated, you can have both a pension plan and a profit sharing plan. You can put away up to 20% of your gross collections every year and sequester them from the government. If you're an individual, all you can have is a KEO or an IRA or something like that, and the maximum is 15% that you can put away in any year if you're only an individual. I will stop advertising or promotions. Look how old this is and out of date, including yellow page listing, unless I have hard data that the effort is attenuating annual revenues in excess of what the costs are. Well, some people send out brochures. Some people make brochures and leave them in others' public spaces. Some people have Psychology Today listing. What's it cost to keep it, by the way, to keep a Psychology Today listing going? Can one of you send me a message and let me know what that might be so I can have it? Because I assume it's nod your head. I can see, is it a continuing expense to have a Psychology Today listing? Ongoing expense every year? Yeah, I'm seeing, yes. All right, so whatever that is, please check how many listings do you actually get from Psychology Today? How many referrals are you getting? Is the Psychology Today listing actually doing anything for you? You making a profit from paying for the listing? I know all my, in the days of Yellow Pages, colleagues would have Yellow Page listings, and they would pay huge sums of money, and they never checked to see whether the Yellow Pages forwarded anybody to them. I'll say a similar thing about Psychology Today. I would far rather you get referrals because the client already has met you in some way and wants to see particularly you, or you get referrals because somebody who knows you anybody and they're coming to you with the credibility of a human connection rather than just they read about you online and there's something in your prose that they like, so they're going to come and see you for that reason. All kinds of strange people will show up in your office slowly over the years if they're coming to you because you have a listing in Psychology Today or some other similar listing. Get listings and get referrals based on human connections. They're much better referrals and much more likely to be good clients with whom to work. Uh, I will secure office management, word processing, and or a bookkeeping program and learn to use them and save secretarial bookkeeping and other accounting costs. Cut down your use of any kinds of people who are doing practical things for your practice. You should be the only one. And Jesus, I probably should start to learn how to file my own tax returns too. I could put in the time doing that, but my accountant is not very expensive. So the only other person that I have to deal with in terms of doing anything to run my practice is my accountant. And she doesn't cost terribly much. So I haven't been motivated yet to learn how to fill out. There's software that will do that for you, that will allow you to file your own tax returns. I haven't gotten around to that. Maybe before I will do that, save that expense too. Get rid of an answering service. If you're still old fashioned and have an answering service, get rid of it and get an answering machine or use voicemail on your cell phone. I will terminate my secretary, receptionist, or other employees. That's the most expensive expense you will have. And I will compensate by installing a call light system in my office if you don't have one and have needed somebody at the desk, at a desk, to open the glass and usher somebody in when you're ready. Let them push a button and have a call light go on your office so you know somebody else is there. Do your own typing, automate your billing and record keeping, and anything else might require to make these changes. Next, stop mailing out announcements, brochures, and any other promotional materials. It's very expensive to do direct mailing, trying to stir business and generate renewed interest and new interest. So stop it. Don't do it anymore. You're not going to get a return on your money. There's usually a 1% return on direct mailings of anything. And they're getting increasingly expensive as postage rates go up. I will save money on rent by moving from a medical building to a general office building, or from an office building, if zoning and home geography permit, to an office in my home. These are progressive ways of spending less money. Medical buildings are always more expensive than general purpose office buildings. They're more expensive because the zoning requirements require, is that mine? Oh, Christ, let me turn that off. Okay, I'm sorry. General office buildings are more expensive to build and operate. They require many more parking spaces. They require special shielding, more electricity, all kinds of things, more plumbing, all kinds of things to make it possible to have medical offices in them. You pay your share of per square foot rent for rent in a medical building, and you get no benefit whatsoever from being there. Besides, it sends the wrong message. When I first went into practice, my colleagues and I were convinced that it was useful to go into medical buildings, that we would get referrals from the doctors in the medical building. They turn out in general to be lousy referrals. Many of them are arrogant, and they now will treat nervous and mental disorders by prescribing them. Won't even send the clients to psychiatrists, let alone to psychologists. They're not good referral sources. And second of all, it sends a message to the public. We are part of the healthcare establishment. We're here with all the other doctors. I don't want to be there with all the other doctors. I want to be with accountants. I want to be with architects. I want to be with other kinds of people who offer services for a fee. I don't want to be with docs. Some medical buildings, very disfigured and incapacitated people show up. They're wearing bandages. Sometimes the place smells fetid. It smells like antiseptic. It's just not a good environment for welcoming people to a psychotherapy office. So get the hell out of medical buildings. General purpose office buildings are very happy to have you as tenants, and they won't charge you as much rent. Home offices are even better. Uh, I cannot tell you how many people feel very happy and comfortable going to see you in a house. It gives them privacy. They don't have to run into other clients in the halls and in the elevators. They have a sense of a specialness, a special bond with you, and a comfort that's given to them because they're on your premises. And those premises are not shared with a large number of other people. Uh, the ideal situation right now, I own a triplex. I have a tenant in one of the units. My wife and I live in the other unit. And the third unit's in a garage apartment across a patio. And the garage apartment is where our offices are. It's totally separate. I just have to walk across the patio and I'm in my office. And my clients never have to come into my home. There's a separate entrance and exit for the garage apartment building. And I just love where I am now. Fortunately, the city of Santa Monica allows home offices too. There's not zoning restrictions against running a business in a residential area. There's a whole list of possible businesses that are allowed to work at home: piano teachers, fitness instructors, accountants, a whole list of various occupations, including therapists and psychologists. We can see up to 6 clients a day, each one of us. And that feels quite adequate to me. The city is trying to keep the parking on the streets from getting too congested, so they limit us to 6 clients a day. And that's more than enough for me to see in any one day. I'm happy. I work 7 days a week. I don't see 6 clients on any one of those days ordinarily. And I scatter them through the week, and I'm happy as content. Finally, if you are in an office not at home, sublease the office if you can for the hours you're not using it. Most of us don't work every evening. Most of us don't work all hours on a weekend, if any hours on a weekend. There's always young people wanting to start their practices, needing to rent offices by the block of time or by the hour. So make some rental income by renting them out. There's some headaches. Sometimes you don't like the person you rented to, but it's worth it. Embrace the headaches of being a landlord and give it a younger generation too. Help them get started, and it will be a nice thing for both of you. And then I left room for other things that people might come up with that they could lower their overhead with. These are the ones that I thought of immediately as I pulled this workshop together. And I'm asking people to commit to it and make check marks, and then go back and see if they followed through on their check marks. Stage 3, here's another thing you must do: safeguard your existing referrals. If we're in practice now getting referrals, please handle them so you don't turn them off and they want to continue seeing you. Don't be clumsy with them. So here we go: changing office practices. Step 1, changing office practices. I have already or soon will implement a sliding fee scale. Begins at $5 per session and goes up from there. I will never again turn any client away because of fee considerations. So this is the problem. It's very easy to get low fee clients. And if you heed my rhetoric and my fee setting strategy, you will have a big share of low fee clients. What you need also to do is I will teach you before the workshop is over how to network out in the world in such a way you get an adequate flow of very wealthy clients, and therefore you can run your practice like Robin Hood. You can charge outrageous fees to the wealthy people, and you'll be in a position to charge fees to those who are just starting out in the world, are struggling financially, are temporarily unemployed, or in terrible trouble. You'll be able to fund their care and still make a reasonable living. I will teach all of it to you. Okay. Oh, I didn't say how to have a sliding fee scale. The rough rule of thumb to use is the fee per session should be 1% of the gross annual income. You can use that as a starting point for thinking about it. So, yes, please ask people what their annual income is. Now, please know also that there will be two kinds of lies that you get if you ask that question. Maybe 40%, 50% of the people you're talking to will actually tell you the truth about what their gross annual income is. A group of maybe 30% of the people you're talking to will catch on that you want to know what they're earning because you're going to set the fee based on what they're earning. So they'll give you a lower figure. They'll cut something off of it so that they can get a lower fee from you. All right, you'll listen. You don't have to set the fee yet. You're listening to other things too while you're doing your initial interview. Uh, there is, however, a strange other group of people who are ashamed of how much they earn, and they will lie upwards. They'll tell you they're earning more than they actually are because they're embarrassed to tell you how little they earn. I have a special soft part in my heart for those people. I like discovering the lie they told me later on and reducing their fee. Makes me feel good. And I'm sorry they felt so little of themselves that they're ashamed and have to lie about their fee. But while I'm thinking of my fee setting, I'm listening to the tale I'm being told about what the client is struggling with, what their life is like. I've gotten their address on a piece of paper. I know something about what section of the city they live in, and I have some wisdom about the cost of living. If they're living in South Central Los Angeles, I know that they're in squalor. If they're living in Bel Air, they must be fairly wealthy people or they wouldn't be able to afford living there. So I can also offset what they're telling me is their annual income by the narrative I'm hearing. Uh, if they're complaining, for instance, that it's so hard to get a decent nanny, and they've even imported one from France, and it's been very expensive, and then they tell me they're very poor, I'm very skeptical about what I'm hearing, or how unpleasant their trip to Hawaii was last year. Uh, you can calibrate and recalibrate what you propose to charge based on the narrative you're hearing about their lifestyle and what you know about the neighborhoods they may live in, and normative data about what their occupation is. If they tell me that they're a neurosurgeon, but Kaiser only pays them $100,000 a year, I think the person's lying. I don't believe that that's what Kaiser pays for neurosurgeons every on an annual basis. Next, I will make a plan running a very high volume business. I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to earn as much money as I used to. But if you're going to be willing to see people who ordinarily other people will turn away because they can't afford the other people, the colleagues' fees, you're likely to find yourself confronting a growing practice with many, many people wanting to see you. So make some early morning and some weekend sessions freely variable, and particularly make them available for conducting initial visits. You'll hear my strategy for conducting the first session, but it depends on responding very quickly to the person's request for being seen, and allowing yourself to see them if it's good for them at some hour you may not ordinarily be working, like 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. They're willing to come in. You make it clear to them you're not necessarily going to have that hour regularly available if the two of you agree to work with each other. But for an initial visit, yes, you'll make that available. You'll come in specially and see them. Just do it. Be very gracious in receiving them. Get ready to work somewhere between 35 and 45 sessions a week if you do what I'm saying and you have a taste for it. You can always say you're too busy to work. Your practice is going to pump up significantly if you follow my lead. This was very novel in the year I started doing this. I will arrange to accept credit cards in payment for fees. and I will begin to experiment with alternative fee arrangements such as payment contracts, retainer arrangements, and so on. Uh, in the year that I started doing this, I didn't run into more than less than 1%. Less than 1% of the people who are in my workshop knew anything about accepting credit cards and payment. They thought that was awful. The usual thing was some kind of strange belief that psychologists had that if you accept credit cards, you're encouraging people to go into debt, and that we had a moral responsibility to keep our clients from going into debt somehow. And I told them they were insane, that the people who wanted to use credit cards in my practice were very wealthy people. They liked charging things on credit cards because they were getting frequent flyer miles. And they were happy that the money they was going to pay to the shrink would help them take nicer vacations. Poor people didn't have credit cards back then. So I don't think I need to tell anybody anymore about credit cards. And now we have all kinds of things like Square and Venmo and a whole bunch of financing systems I don't know anything about. But as one who receives fees, I'm happy to be as flexible as possible. I always ask also if I'm going to continue seeing somebody, do they want to pay every time they come, or would they rather be billed monthly, regardless of the way that they pay? Cash, Venmo, whatever they're doing. And I will adjust the payment ritual to whatever seems best for them. And if they want to be billed, they want me to send them a statement, and so they can send back a check, or they want to have an invoice before I charge a credit card. I'm happy to accommodate that. Whatever way is most comfortable for them at whatever interval they want to pay. Now, not enough of us have yet started to experiment with such things as fee paying contracts or retainers. There are some of us who've gone over into forensic psychology that now get retainers. They will, some of the custody evaluators get retainers. They will say that they're going to charge by the hour, but they want a retainer before starting because they know it's going to be fairly expensive and they want a goodwill offering. Just like sometimes dentists will do this for orthodontia, lawyers do legal representation. They get a few $1,000s up front, and then they apply the services they're applying. They keep reducing the amount that's left in the retainer. And finally, when it's gone, they'll say, in order to go on, they need some additional money given into the retainer fund again. There's nothing unethical about doing that. If that's a mindset that would seem to occupy the circumstances of your services, or be something, maybe you have a lawyer client, makes sense to a lawyer client to do that. Or if you have, here's another contract you can get. It's not a retainer arrangement. If somebody's out of work, you can say you'd like a good faith offering of some payment. You know they're on unemployment right now. They can pay you $5 a month, and you will carry the rest. And when they get a job finally at the end of the first month, they'll continue giving you the $5, and then you'll work out a fee. They'll start reducing the debt at such and such an amount every month. There was another thing that Al Lasco, may he rest in peace, a very beloved and departed friend and former colleague, used to do with his practice. He had been a former UCLA professor, and for one reason or another, he seemed to continue to have a bunch of young people in his practice. And he would tell them that based on his evaluation of what they had presented to him, they were probably going to come at least between 10 and 20 sessions before it's likely that the two of them would agree that maybe enough benefit had been happening, they might stop, or they might go on for longer, depending on circumstances. So he thinks it's going to cost them, he would set a fee. This will guarantee you 20 visits, and I'll refund the rest if it doesn't work. So 20 visits, I'm going to charge you $50 a pop. That'll be $1,000. why don't you give me $1,000 and we'll go ahead. And if you haven't used up the $1,000, I'll refund the money when you're done. They'll say, I can't give you $1,000. I don't have $1,000. Then he would say, well, I have an arrangement with the local bank. Any client of mine can go to the bank and on your signature, the bank will give you $1,000. And it's good for you. You're young. You'll start building up credit. You'll have to make payments to the bank. They'll work out a payment schedule with you. But please make payments to the bank. And if you discharge your responsibility to the bank, that'll certainly help your credit rating. What they did not know was he had an arrangement with the bank that anybody he sent over, he would co-sign the loan for. So he would guarantee payment. And if they defaulted, he would make it good. He trusted his clients to be reasonable and responsible, and the bank would give the money to them, even if they seemed to be a poor credit risk, because he was on the hook for them. I thought that was a wonderful, sensible, and loving thing that he was doing. I haven't found another colleague yet who's willing to engage in such a practice. I think it's beautiful. Uh, and so be creative. You can work anything that's reasonable with a client. Next, I will follow up referrals from any secondary source, and I will define what I mean by a secondary source momentarily. Referrals from a secondary source with a thank you note and a personal telephone call or fax to brief him and her about the case. If the secondary source asks for a charitable contribution from me, I will respond positively and promptly. If people have been used to referring to me, I get phone calls sometimes. I'm raising money for such and such a cause this year. Would you make a contribution? And they know they have me because they've sent me lots of referrals. So I will. I'll make a contribution to a charitable contribution if they're asking me. About acknowledging the referral, yes, please don't trouble them for time. You can send, you probably have their email address. You can send them an email now. You don't have to drop them. The client, the middle-aged woman who you referred to me, did get in touch with me, and she's an interesting case, and we've decided to start the work. Would you like to be informed about the progress we're making? If she consents to it, I'd be happy to keep you in the loop and touch base with you from time to time. Or if you just want to trust me to go ahead and you don't need to hear anything further other than that I'm seeing her, that's fine too. Just let me know if you want more from me and do that. Acknowledge the saliency in your life of people who are making referrals to you and be gracious to them. You can send them a bottle of wine at Christmas time if they're particularly nice to you, or a basket of fruit from, what is it, Harry and David? Send them a basket of fruit for sending you referrals. I don't think that's a dual relationship, any kind of conflict of interest. All right, the next thing that's necessary to keep your relationship going with no referrals is for you to change your technical stance. Stop doing what you think you've needed to do. Here's the first one. Stop doing intake interviews. Instead, I will begin my counseling work with the receipt of the client's phone call and treat the initial visit as a treatment session and not as a fact-finding time. All right. I am going to move out now of what I'm doing. I'm going to take the document away because we're going to pause the document now. And I'm going to go back onto regular screen. And the reason I'm doing that is talking about reconfiguring the initial interview is a long topic in and of itself. And I don't want to move on till the other thing until I fully expressed my counsel to anybody who's about this, the sensible, kind, and therapeutic way to conduct an initial interview. And I have much to say about that. I actually presented a workshop on that topic for 2 hours at the Los Angeles County Psychological Association meeting this past fall. The initial interview does not begin when the client walks in the door of the office. The initial interview begins when the client reaches out to you in some way. These days, somebody might have given your cell phone, so you get a text message from a new client. If you have a website, they might have looked at your website and your email address is on the website, so you get an email from them. Uh, Somebody who's referred them to you may have given them your email address, or they may have left a voicemail for you on your office landline, if you still have one, or on your office cell phone if you've been in session and haven't responded to a phone call to your cell phone. So consider that your relationship starts the first time you hear the message. You now are beginning a relationship with the client. The client hasn't existed in your consciousness until then, and now the client exists. So my first the first principle is get, no, that's too much. You might not be able to. Try to get back to whoever has left a message for you before that day is over. I don't care if you picked up the message at 7 o'clock in the evening, try to get back to that person before the day is over. You have to demonstrate from the beginning a responsiveness and a receptiveness, and that's probably the way you're going to do it. My best guess is you'll most likely play some tag. If you've gotten an email and don't have any way to get back to them except sending them back an email, send them back an email. There'll be a time date on it. And in the email, say you're very eager to speak to them in person, and could they provide you a phone number where they can be reached and give you some approximate times as soon as possible when they might be available for you to confer with them? If it's a text message, do the same thing. And if you have to leave a voicemail, leave the same message. Maybe you'll be lucky and catch them, but most likely you won't. And you may be in a back and forth once or twice. If I'll be strong in that. Move heaven and earth the next day if you haven't made a connection with them to actually do something in person and in real time the next day. Have not a text message back and forth. Have a phone conversation. Arrange to offer them a visit if you can, but have a real back and forth with them the next day. It'll most likely be a phone call of some kind. If they have left you a list of possible times when they can be reached, if you have to move something around to gratify them and do it at a time they're available, do that. Don't say to them, I'm sorry, none of those times are any good. Let's try for the next day. Don't keep stalling. Just be available. The signal is, I will try and accommodate you wherever it's possible. If you have to keep a new client waiting for 15 minutes and backlog yourself for the rest of the day to give yourself at least 15 minutes to return a call, do that. Cancel and reschedule a client if you have to make a gap in your schedule so you can return the phone call. Whatever it takes, but get on the phone with the live person the next day. Be prepared to be interviewed. Sometimes you will be lucky. Yeah, for me, it's about 20% of the time I'll get a live person, and they'll say, "How soon can I see you?" And I'll take out my book and I'll try and find a time, and we'll settle that. And they say, "Okay, I have lots to tell you. I'll tell you when I see you." That's gracious. That's wonderful. But that hardly ever happens. They usually have some preoccupation on their minds that they want to talk to before they're willing to think about setting up an appointment to see you. It can run the gamut of things. Do you take Aetna health insurance? So just tell them the truth. And my present truth is, no, I'm not signed up with any health insurance company. Uh, I uh, I am what's called an outwork provider. if we decide to do some work together and you come to see me, I will give you what's called in the industry a super bill that has a diagnosis. It lists your visit, it lists the amount of money that I've charged you and whatever you've paid me, and it has many facts about you, like what's your diagnosis, have you ever had this condition before? Everything you need to collect money that will be paid to you by an insurance company will be on that piece of paper, but it's up to you to serve it on the insurance company to forward it to the address that's probably on the back of your insurance card. Well, how much are they going to reimburse me? I don't know. Every policy is different. I can't tell you that. You may have to call your carrier and find out what the reimbursement is. Tell them that you're getting mental health services from an out-of-network provider and what is the reimbursement rate for that, and they'll inform you. I don't know the answer. There's so many insurance companies. Many people have a whole variety of plans, so I have no expertise on that. I'm sorry I can't help you with that. You might even be able to look it up online. You can try that too to see if you can find it out online. Well, I don't want to proceed until I know if I'm going to get paid for seeing you. I said, oh, that you don't have to worry about that. I see people for a first visit without charging them. I don't know if I want to see you any more than you know if you want to. This is a mutual decision. We have to feel that there's some meaning to talking to each other and it might lead to some good outcome. So come, you can interview me not only about insurance, about anything else you want to know about me or want to tell me about, and we'll just see what it's like working with each other. Oh, that usually works very well. They're usually very grateful, and that will end the conversation and we'll make an appointment. Uh, we may get there by a different means. Are you a specialist in eating disorders? Uh, I say, no, it depends on what you mean by specialist. I've been in practice for many decades now, and I've seen a number of people, a large number of people who have struggled with problems in eating, bulimia, what's labeled as bulimia, what's labeled as anorexia, strange fetish behavior with food. I am familiar with an array of issues having to do with what people eat and trouble about what they eat. And I've worked extensively with such people, but they're not the only people I work with. Well, who do you specialize in? I specialize in people who are troubled about their lives and want to do something about it. That's who I specialize with. And the youngest client I'm currently seeing is 10 years old, and the oldest is 92. And I see individuals and I see couples who are in trouble and I see families who are in trouble. I'll work in any combination with combinations of people too. If there's problem solving that I can help with, I'm there to try and facilitate better solutions to the challenges of living. So if you just want to come in and talk about what you think you might need help with, I'll be glad to see if I have anything useful to say to you. Uh, that one helps a lot too. Uh, there's still others who need to know a lot about me. My favorite story to tell is the hour and a half interview that I had with a potential client. He really wanted to talk to me for an hour and a half about me and about my views on something before he would agree to think about making an appointment. So I'll tell you the story. He was a UCLA student. He was an engineering student. And since UCLA is a liberal arts college, even the people in technical majors have to take a certain number of units of what are called breadth requirements. They have to be educated people, generally educated people, not just technicians in something. So he was satisfying his breadth requirement in the social sciences. He had signed up for a course in psychology. Uh, the what was the course about? I forget what the subject matter was. It was critical issues in psychology, I think was the title of it. It was just a sampling of the kinds of things psychologists do research on and wrestle with. And so it was the summer school course he was taking. He was calling me in the summertime. And he was assigned a book to read, The Drama of the Gifted Child. And he said the book bothered him terribly. he'd had trouble getting through it. He had felt a great surge of, he couldn't even label the inset, the upset. It was some kind of dread, some kind of anxiety was happening to him, and he was very bothered. And he began, for the first time in life, think maybe he had a psychological problem that he wasn't paying enough attention to, and he felt a kinship with what he was reading in the book, and maybe he should get some professional help. So at a break in the class, he had gone up and asked the professor if the professor knew some psychologist that he could go consult for some personal reasons. He didn't specify what. And the professor at first recommended the counseling center at UCLA. And he said, no, no, I'm not comfortable. I might see somebody I know going into the counseling center. I need to see somebody off campus. So the prof had given them the names of some colleagues in the community that he knew that he could go see off campus, but he was very meticulous about how he went about things. He was going to make a wonderful engineer. So he went up to the Department of Psychology in addition, and he asked the secretary in the Department of Psychology, did the department maintain a roster of psychologists in the community that students could be referred to? He understood that often psychology graduate students were asked or preferred to get some psychological help for themselves before they entered the profession. And was that program there set up in that way? And were there referrals available? And could he have the names of the people on the referral list that the department had? And she said, well, we usually just save this for our students, but it's not a private thing. Yeah, I don't see any reason why I can't give you a copy. So she had given him a copy. He had the prof's copy now and the department's copy of potential referrals. So he said he was going to systematically go through each of the people on his list, and he had a variety of questions to ask them before he decided whether he wanted to. I said, okay, so I'm one of the persons on the list you have. He said, yes. Can I ask, were you given by the prof or were you given by the department? Said, no, the prof gave me your name. I said, oh, I'm surprised. I don't really know him, but he must know somebody who knows me, or he read something that I wrote once. So that was nice. It was nice of him to send you. So where am I on the list? And he said, you're the third person I'm going to talk to. I've talked to the other two. I said, okay, so what is it you want to know? Well, have you read the book? And I said, that's the first question. I said, yes, I've read the book. He said, could you sum up what you think about the book? And I said, well, I think it's a good book. There's some really interesting observations in there. It's about growing up with an exceptionally egocentric and self-centered parents, and the damage this does to a child to have parents who are wired that way. And the writer says that this is a very common problem, and she winds up working with a large number of clients who have been damaged in this way. Maybe you're seeing some kinship with the things you're reading about, but I'm going to tell you a dirty secret about the profession. She prevents this as if it's a huge and oft occurring problem that large portions of her practice come in with. Uh, I'll tell you something about us as professionals. Typically, we get fascinated with our own wounds, and we see our own wounds everywhere, and we write about our own wounds, and we try to understand our own wounds, and we try to overcome and transcend our own wounds. I'm not sure that what she's writing about is as universal as she claims in her work it is. Nevertheless, this is important work for some fairly small but not insignificant segment of the entire public of people who might show up in a psychologist's office. It's well worth those of us in the profession reading and taking note of, and it will be helpful for some portion of people we work with. That's my overall judgment of the book. He said, well, would you mind? There are some passages that are unclear to me. She makes some statements in the book. I'm not sure what she was talking about, and I couldn't tell whether I agree with them or not. And I'd like you to explain to me what you think she's saying and whether you agree with this observation or not. I said, okay. He said, I've highlighted the places in the book that I'm confused about. I said, how many you got there? He said, 39. I said, okay, so you want my comments on 39 different parts of the book? Yes. I said, well, I'll tell you, you asked me this and this is important to you, so I'll do it for you. Well, I have the time. This is my lunch hour. It may take longer than this lunch hour. So I want to warn you, I do have to see somebody at 1 o'clock. We started I called you back just after 12. Going to have to stop promptly at 1, but commitment. I will answer all the turgid passages in the book. I will try and clear them up, tell you my understanding of them, what I think. I may have to call you back again tomorrow. Can we find a time that we're both free tomorrow so I can finish this phone call if I don't get done with it today? And I was feeling like a strange kind of rebellion and absolutely ridiculous. I believed from the bottom of my heart, not one colleague on that list was going to do what I was about to do. Many of my clients I know are like used car salesmen. If somebody calls up and starts taking up more than 2 or 3 minutes of their time, they want to get the person in the office. They start pressuring them right away. Well, you have a lot of things to talk about. Make an appointment, come in and we'll talk about all of them. And they're pressuring people to close the deal already uh, before the person has gotten comfortable talking to them. Don't make that mistake. I was not going to make that was a mistake. I was going to even bend over backwards to accommodate what this peculiar and unusual client was asking me to do that I had never been asked to do before. What was the harm? Who was I harming by doing it? Why was I going to try and get him to cut to the quick? As a matter of fact, if he was going to come to see me, I think I was going to have an advantage over all the other people he was talking to because nobody else was going to put up with him. Poor guy. All he would learn is that we were self-centered, irritating, and curt assholes. That's what we were, and he would decide not to proceed with any treatment after going through that ritual. But I was going to be gracious, so we started. I got through about 28 or 29 of his prompts by the time it was up, and I did finish the next day. So I asked him, I said, would you like to make an appointment now? And he said, oh no, I saw one other person. I talked to one other person other than you. He talked to me for a little while, but he didn't want to go on. He kept trying to persuade me to come in. And I said, I'm not surprised, but I am going to talk to all the rest. I made a commitment to myself. I'm going to be thorough about this. This is a very important decision and I have to be. I said, fine. When you get done, if you want an appointment, I'll be here. I'm not retiring or dying in the near future. And I expected to hear from him some period of time ahead. And then I proceeded to forget about him entirely. And because I was going about my other business and returning other phone calls and conducting sessions in my office and being with my wife and friends and watching movies and while listening to music and doing all the other things. He ceased to exist in my consciousness. 6 weeks after he called me, however, there was a voicemail message from him. He was calling to talk to me. And I said, aha, now he's going to come and see me. So I returned his phone call and I said, I'm getting back to you. Are you calling to make an appointment now? He said, no, I'm calling to thank you. That's all I'm calling to do. I said, what are you thanking me for? The only one who actually took the time to answer all my questions. I said, well, I take my clients very seriously. And if they tell me something's important to them and it's something I can help them with, I'm certainly willing to. So thank you for thanking me, but no thanks are necessary. You're not ready to make an appointment though. And he said, no. I said, well, something in what you went through or what you thought about secondarily convinced you not to proceed at this point. He said, no, I said, well, that's really interesting. What do the words "I'm not ready" mean? He said, I've come to think that that surge I felt when I first started trying to read that book really represents something I've locked away inside myself somewhere. There's something I'm not paying attention to, something that's pretty overwhelming. I could feel the early stages of thinking about getting to work on it was very frightening to me. And I decided I want to be older and stronger I go there. And uh, maybe after I finish school, maybe after I'm employed, maybe after I've left my parents' home and I'm not dependent on them anymore. Because I think this is about my parents. That's what the book was about. And maybe it'll be safer for me to start making a review of what happened to me then. Doesn't feel safe now. I'm afraid I'll get overwhelmed. And I said, you know what? You're already very sophisticated psychologically, even though you're not a psych major. I said, and you don't know it. You and I have a mystical connection. You could be my twin in some ways. My father died when I was 12. That was my wound. It was very different from the wounds you may be carrying. And I never cried. I didn't cry at his funeral. I became like a soldier just marching through my life after that. Almost all my feelings got cut off and squelched and put away. And I never mourned. I never grieved. I was robot-like as I lived my life. And one day when I was 25 and in graduate school, I had a paper due and I looked over to see what the date was. And I thought to myself, oh my God, it's going to be January 13th tomorrow. And that's the anniversary of my father's death. And when I heard my voice saying inside me, that's the anniversary of my father's death, I suddenly lost control of myself and I started weeping and weeping and weeping. And all the tears that had been pent up in me, all those years came flowing out of me. I cried for more than an hour. I couldn't stop crying. And I too went into therapy after that. That was the thing that galvanized me to get started. The department suggested I do it, but they weren't pressuring me to do it at any particular time. But I felt ready and it felt necessary for me. And I soon went after that. And you may have to go through something similar before it's time for you to go. So I salute you. And I think you may have come to the right choice. And I will tell you again, I'm not planning on dying or retiring in the near future. And if the day comes when you want my coaching and my companionship, I'll be glad to help you to explore what is locked up inside of you that you haven't been ready to visit yet. So my best wishes for you, and thank you for giving me back a special memory. And that was the end of the conversation. And I'm still waiting for him to show up in my office. But on that note, I will stop this. And you guys can unmute yourself and join me in talking about whatever you want to talk about.
I have a quick question for you, Arthur.
Yes.
And um, in regard to the practice, how often should one increase the fee and how much, excuse me, should that be?
Now you are being quite unfair. One should not only increase the fee, one should be ready to decrease the fee.
Aha,
If somebody goes to a lesser career where they make less money, I usually do it annually. I reevaluate soon after the first of the year. I say, I'm going to leave your fee alone for this year. Your expenses are going up. You haven't gotten a raise. It's fine. But you and I are in a partnership, and if thing change, please let me know if there's a change, and we'll talk about it again.
Okay.
It's interesting that you focused only on fees going up.
Yeah, Arthur, how much did you pay your clients to come in?
Oh, that's another story for another time.
Maybe there's more than one
I
story.
paid to come to therapy. Other questions? Other comments?
Well, it was very useful. I do many of those things, but it's been a few years since I've looked over my practice that closely. It was very useful.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I still don't like talking about the business of psychology, even though people need to be educated about it. I much rather tell stories like the story of the client who wanted to interview me about the passages in the book. That turns me on and brings me to life much better. But I will return to the treatment plan because I'm still talking about the conduct of the initial session. That I do like talking about. That's a professional issue, not a business issue. And that's where I'll pick it up next time. Because I will assume now we're getting ready, the client will come to a session, and now we have to start talking to the client face to face. So we'll pick up there next week. Thanks, guys.
One more comment or observation. The client that you talked about that never came in, sometimes that pays great dividend in terms of kind of like other referrals, in that the client would basically say, well, no, I never saw Dr. Kovacs, but he took quite a while in terms of talking to me, and he was quite
Yes.
kind.
Yes, thank you. Every client we see, or even ones we sometimes we just talk to, become potential referral sources. And that's another beautiful thing about our career. As the group of people you've worked with keeps enlarging, the likelihood that you have to do anything to cultivate more referrals starts waning. And after a while, you don't have to do anything to cultivate new referrals.
Yes.
Okay, guys,
Okay.
have a good
All right.
weekend.
You too. Take
Been a
care.
Bye.
pleasure.
Bye.
Bye, guys.